cold November morning felt like needles against Marcus Johnson's skin. He pulled his worn green army jacket tighter around his body and tried to find a warmer position on the wooden bench. The jacket was the last thing he owned from his military days. It had holes in 3 places and the zipper was broken, but Marcus refused to throw it away. Marcus was 58 years old, but most people thought he looked much older. His hair was completely gray and his face had deep lines from too many nights sleeping outside. His hands shook slightly, not from the cold but from something deeper that lived inside his mind. The doctors called it PTSD. Marcus just called it the memories that won't leave. He had been sleeping on this bench outside Joe's coffee shop for 3 weeks now. The owner, a kind man named Joe Park, never complained. Sometimes Joe even brought him a cup of coffee and a bagel before the shop opened. Marcus always said thank you and always tried to keep the area clean. It was a matter of pride. Just because he had no home didn't mean he had no dignity. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to sleep a bit more. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In a few hours, the street would be busy with people rushing to work. But right now it was quiet and peaceful. The sound of a car door slamming made Marcus open his eyes. He saw a police car parked at the curb. 2 officers were getting out. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had done nothing wrong, but experience taught him that didn't always matter. The first officer was a white man in his mid-30s with short blonde hair and cold blue eyes. His name tag said Mitchell. He walked with the kind of confidence that came from having power and knowing it. The second officer was a woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her name tag said Rodriguez. She looked uncomfortable, like she didn't want to be there. Officer Mitchell walked straight toward Marcus with heavy steps. His hand rested on his belt near his weapon. Marcus slowly sat up and put his hands where the officers could see them. He had learned this lesson a long time ago. Well, Officer Mitchell said with a nasty smile. What do we have here? Looks like someone's been using this bench as a bedroom. Marcus spoke in a calm, quiet voice. Good morning, officer. I was just resting. I'm not causing any trouble. Mitchell laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not causing trouble? You're sleeping on public property. You're making this nice area look like a dump. That's trouble in my book. I'm sorry, sir, Marcus said. I'll move along if you want. I just needed a place to sleep for the night. Mitchell kicked at Marcus's plastic bag that held all his belongings. The bag fell over and some things spilled out onto the sidewalk. An old photo of Marcus's wife, a pair of socks, a can of beans, and a small American flag fell onto the cold concrete. Look at all this junk, Mitchell said loudly. You people always have so much trash everywhere. Don't you have any pride? Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry at a police officer was dangerous, especially for someone like him. He reached for his things slowly and carefully. I do have pride, officer, Marcus said quietly. I served my country for 6 years. I fought in Vietnam. I earned the right to be treated with respect. Mitchell's eyes narrowed. Oh, here we go. Another one claiming to be a veteran. You know how many homeless people tell me that story? It's always the same excuse. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn plastic card. It was his veteran ID card from the Department of Veterans Affairs. The plastic was cracked and the photo was faded, but it was real. He held it out to Mitchell with a shaking hand. Mitchell grabbed the card roughly and looked at it for a few seconds. Then he laughed again, that same cruel laugh. This could be fake. Anyone can make a fake ID these days. I bet you bought this at some flea market. It's real, Marcus said, his voice still calm but with an edge now. I served 2 tours. I got a Purple Heart and a Silver Star. I bled for this country. All I'm asking is to be treated like a human being. Mitchell threw the ID card at Marcus. It hit his chest and fell to the ground. I don't care what you say you did. Right now, you're just another homeless guy making my city look bad. You've got 5 minutes to pack up all this garbage and get out of here. If I see you on this bench again, I'm taking you to jail. Officer Rodriguez shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she stayed quiet. Marcus could see the conflict in her eyes, but he knew she wouldn't help him. Police officers protected each other, not people like him. Marcus slowly began gathering his belongings. His hands were shaking more now, partly from anger and partly from shame. He picked up the photo of his wife, Sarah. She had died 5 years ago from cancer. The medical bills had destroyed him financially. After she died, his PTSD got worse. He couldn't hold a job. He couldn't keep his apartment. One thing led to another, and now here he was, being treated like trash by a man who should have been protecting him. Mitchell watched Marcus pick up his things with a smirk on his face. "You know what I think?" he said to Rodriguez, but loud enough for Marcus to hear. "I think we need to clean up this city. Get rid of all these people who don't want to work. They just want handouts and free rides." "I worked my whole life," Marcus said, standing up with his bag in his arms. "I worked before the war, during the war, and after the war. I paid my taxes. I raised a family. I did everything right. And then life happened. Bad things happen to good people, officer. Maybe you'll learn that someday." Mitchell's face turned red with anger. He stepped closer to Marcus, so close that Marcus could smell the coffee on his breath. "Are you threatening me? Because if you are, I can make your life a whole lot worse than it already is." Marcus took a step back. "No threat, sir. Just stating a fact. I'm leaving now." Mitchell grabbed Marcus's bag and walked over to a trash can on the corner. He dumped everything inside. The photo of Sarah, the socks, the beans, the flag, everything Marcus owned, fell into the garbage with a loud clatter. "There," Mitchell said, brushing his hands together. "Now you don't have to carry all that weight. You should thank me." Marcus stood frozen, staring at the trash can. Everything he had left in the world was now sitting in garbage. He felt tears burning in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He wouldn't give Mitchell that satisfaction. What none of them knew was that someone was watching from across the street. A young woman named Sarah Chen stood in front of the grocery store next to the coffee shop. She had her phone out, and she had been recording the entire encounter. Sarah was a journalist for the local newspaper. She had come to get coffee before work, and instead she witnessed something that made her blood boil. Sarah's finger shook slightly as she stopped the recording. She had just captured something important, something that needed to be seen by everyone. She looked at the screen of her phone, making sure the video was clear. It was perfect. Every word, every action, every cruel laugh was recorded. Inside Joe's coffee shop, another person had been watching too. A man in his 50s sat at a table near the window. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a sweater, but he had the bearing of someone used to authority. His name was James Morrison, and he was the new captain of internal affairs for the Portland Police Department. He had been at the coffee shop for a morning meeting with a friend. Morrison's jaw was tight as he watched the scene outside. He knew Officer Mitchell by reputation. There had been complaints, whispers, stories about how Mitchell treated certain people, but there had never been solid evidence. Now, Morrison had just watched it happen with his own eyes. Marcus walked away slowly, his shoulders bent like he was carrying a heavy weight. He didn't look back at Mitchell or Rodriguez. He just walked down the street, heading toward nowhere in particular. He had no destination anymore, no home to go to, no safe place to rest. Mitchell watched him go with satisfaction. Then he turned to Rodriguez. "See how easy that was? These people just need a firm hand. They need to know who's in charge." Rodriguez nodded slowly, but her face looked pale. She got back into the police car without saying a word. Mitchell followed her, whistling a tune like he had just done something good instead of something cruel. As the police car drove away, Sarah Chen crossed the street. She walked to the trash can and looked inside. She could see the American flag lying on top of the garbage, its red and white stripes dirty and crumpled. She took out her phone again and took a picture. Then she went into the coffee shop. Captain Morrison was still sitting by the window. Sarah recognized him immediately. She had interviewed him once for a story about police reform. She walked over to his table. "Captain Morrison," she said, "did you see what just happened outside?" Morrison looked up at her. His eyes were hard and angry. "I saw it, Ms. Chen, every single second of it." Sarah sat down without being invited. She pulled out her phone. "I recorded it, all of it. What are you going to do about this?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Show me the video." Sarah Chen pulled up the video on her phone and handed it to Captain Morrison. Her hand was steady now, even though her heart was racing. She had been a journalist for 5 years, but she had never recorded anything this powerful before. Morrison pressed play and watched the screen carefully. Sarah watched his face as he viewed the video. She could see his jaw get tighter with each passing second. His eyes narrowed when Mitchell kicked Marcus's bag. His hand formed a fist when Mitchell laughed and threw the ID card. When the video ended, Morrison handed the phone back to Sarah. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the empty street. How long have you known about Officer Mitchell? Sarah asked. Morrison looked at her with tired eyes. I've been the head of internal affairs for 3 months. In that time, I've received 12 complaints about Derek Mitchell. 12. All from homeless people or people of color. But every single complaint was dismissed or never properly investigated. Why? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Because homeless people aren't seen as reliable witnesses, Morrison said bitterly. Because Mitchell has friends in the department. Because the system protects its own even when its own is rotten. Sarah leaned forward. But now you have evidence. Video evidence that can't be denied or explained away. Morrison nodded slowly. Yes, now I have evidence. But Miss Chen, I need to ask you for something. I need you to hold this story for 48 hours. Give me time to build a proper case before this goes public. Sarah frowned. Every instinct she had as a journalist told her to publish the story immediately. This was important. People needed to see this. But she also understood that Morrison needed time to do his job properly. If I wait, what will you do? She asked. Morrison's voice was firm. I'm going to pull Mitchell's body camera footage from this morning. I'm going to interview every person who has filed a complaint against him. I'm going to talk to his partner, Officer Rodriguez, and I'm going to find that homeless veteran and get his full story. His name is Marcus Johnson, Sarah said. I'm going to find him too. I want to hear what he has to say. Morrison stood up from the table. Then we both have work to do. 48 hours, Ms. Chen. Can I count on you? Sarah thought about it for a few more seconds. Then she nodded. 48 hours. But after that, this story goes live with or without your case being ready. Morrison offered his hand. Sarah shook it. Fair enough, he said. Thank you for recording this. And thank you for caring enough to do something about it. After Morrison left, Sarah sat alone at the table and opened her laptop. She had research to do. She needed to find out everything she could about Marcus Johnson and Derek Mitchell. She needed to understand the full story before she wrote a single word. Sarah started with Marcus Johnson. She searched military databases and public records. What she found made her heart ache. Marcus had enlisted in the Army in 1967 when he was just 19 years old. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He earned a Silver Star for valor, a Bronze Star for meritorious service, and a Purple Heart after being wounded in combat. He had been honorably discharged in 1973 and returned home to Portland. He got married to a woman named Sarah, just like the journalist's own name. He worked as a mechanic for 30 years at the same auto shop. He raised a daughter named Jennifer. By all accounts, he was a good man who lived a good life. Then 5 years ago, his wife was diagnosed with cancer. The medical bills were huge. Even with insurance, Marcus couldn't keep up with the costs. His wife fought for 2 years before she died. Marcus was destroyed by grief and debt. His PTSD, which he had managed for decades, came back with terrible force. He lost his job because he couldn't focus. He lost his apartment because he couldn't pay rent. His daughter tried to help, but she had her own family and her own problems. Marcus didn't want to be a burden, so he ended up on the streets, one of thousands of veterans who slipped through the cracks. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as she read Marcus's story. This was a man who had given everything for his country, and his country had failed him completely. Next, she researched Derek Mitchell. What she found was disturbing but not surprising. Mitchell had been a police officer for 8 years. He had a record of aggression and complaints, 12 formal complaints in the past 3 years alone, but there were also informal complaints, stories that never made it into official records. Sarah called contacts in the homeless community, people she had met while working on previous stories. They all had stories about Mitchell. He targeted Black and Latino homeless people specifically. He destroyed their belongings. He made racist comments. He threatened them with arrest for minor violations or sometimes for nothing at all. One man named Robert told Sarah about a time when Mitchell had poured out his water bottles during a heat wave. He said, "I didn't deserve water if I wasn't willing to work for it," Robert said. "But I do work. I collect cans and bottles for recycling. I make enough for food most days." But he didn't care about that. A woman named Maria told Sarah that Mitchell had torn up her daughter's homework. "My daughter is 10, Maria said through tears. "We live in our car, but she still goes to school. She's a good student." Mitchell saw her homework on the car seat and ripped it up, said we were making the neighborhood look trashy. Story after story, all following the same pattern. Mitchell was cruel to vulnerable people, and he seemed to enjoy it. Sarah spent the rest of the day tracking down Marcus Johnson. She visited shelters and soup kitchens. She talked to other homeless people and asked if they knew where Marcus might be. Finally, around dinner time, she found him at a shelter called Hope House on the east side of the city. Marcus was sitting alone at a table in the corner of the common room. He had a tray of food in front of him, but he wasn't eating. He was just staring at the wall with empty eyes. Sarah approached carefully. "Mr. Johnson? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a journalist. I was there this morning. I saw what happened with Officer Mitchell." Marcus looked up at her slowly. His eyes were red and tired. "You want to write a story about the poor homeless veteran? Make people feel sorry for me?" Sarah sat down across from him. "No, sir. I want to write a story about injustice, about how a police officer abused his power and humiliated a man who served his country. I want people to know what happened to you, and I want them to be angry about it." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Will it matter? Will anyone care?" "I think they will," Sarah said. "But I need your permission. I need you to tell me your story. All of it." Marcus looked at his tray of food, cold mashed potatoes and some kind of meat. He pushed it away. "I'm tired of my story," he said. "I'm tired of explaining how I ended up here. I'm tired of people looking at me like I'm less than human." "Then help me change that," Sarah said. "Help me show people that you're not less than human. You're a hero who's been forgotten. Let me remind people of that." Marcus finally looked at her directly. He studied her face for a long moment, trying to decide if he could trust her. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you everything. But I have one condition." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "When you write this story, don't make me sound like a victim. I survived Vietnam. I survived losing my wife. I survived losing everything. I'm a survivor, not a victim. Remember that." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "I promise," she said. For the next 2 hours, Marcus told Sarah his story. He talked about growing up in Portland, about deciding to enlist because he wanted to serve his country. He talked about Vietnam, about the friends he lost, about the things he saw that still haunted his dreams. He talked about coming home, about trying to build a normal life, about meeting his wife at a church social, about their wedding day, about the birth of their daughter. He talked about 30 years of honest work, of being a good husband and father. Then he talked about the cancer, about watching his wife waste away, about the bills that kept coming even after she died. He talked about the depression that swallowed him whole, about the PTSD that came back with a vengeance. He talked about losing his job, his home, his dignity. "The worst part isn't being homeless," Marcus said. "The worst part is being invisible. People walk past you like you're not even there. Or worse, they look at you like you're something dirty that needs to be cleaned up. That's what Officer Mitchell sees when he looks at me. Something to be cleaned up." Sarah was taking notes furiously, but she stopped and looked at Marcus. "You're not invisible to me, Mr. Johnson. And after my story runs, you won't be invisible to anyone." Meanwhile, across the city, Captain Morrison was in his office at the police station. He had pulled the body camera footage from Mitchell and Rodriguez for that morning. What he found was damning. Mitchell's body camera had been turned off. According to the log, he had forgotten to activate it before approaching Marcus. This was supposedly an accident, but Morrison knew better. He checked Mitchell's body camera records for the past 2 years. Mitchell had forgotten to turn on his camera 47 times. Almost all of those incidents involved homeless people or people of color. Rodriguez's body camera had been on, but the angle wasn't good. It mostly showed Mitchell's back and didn't capture his face or the worst of what he said. Still, it was something. Morrison called Rodriguez into his office. She came in looking nervous. She knew why she was there. "Officer Rodriguez," Morrison said, "I want to ask you about the incident this morning with the homeless veteran." Rodriguez sat down stiffly. "What do you want to know, sir?" "I want to know what really happened. I want to know what Officer Mitchell said and did. And I want to know why you didn't stop him." Rodriguez's face crumbled. She had been holding this inside for too long. "Captain, I wanted to stop him. I've wanted to stop him for months. But he's my training officer. He has friends in the department. I was afraid that if I reported him, my career would be over." Morrison leaned forward. "Your career will definitely be over if you keep protecting bad officers. But if you help me now, if you tell me the truth, I'll make sure you're protected. You have my word." Rodriguez took a deep breath. Then she started talking. She told Morrison everything. Every racist comment Mitchell had made. Every homeless person he had abused. every time he had turned off his body camera before doing something wrong. She gave names, dates, details. She told him about the unwritten rules about how some officers believed their job was to keep undesirables out of nice neighborhoods. She told him about the culture of silence, about how officers who reported misconduct were labeled as traitors. When she finished, Morrison had pages of notes. He had names of other victims to interview. He had evidence of a pattern of behavior. He had what he needed to build a real case. "Thank you, Officer Rodriguez," Morrison said. "What you did today took real courage. That's the kind of officer this department needs." Rodriguez stood up to leave. At the door, she turned back. "Captain, that man this morning, Marcus Johnson. Is he okay?" Morrison thought about the video, about Marcus being forced to watch his belongings dumped in the trash. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm going to make sure he gets the help he deserves." After Rodriguez left, Morrison sat at his desk and thought about what to do next. He had 48 hours before Sarah's story went public. He needed to use that time wisely. He needed to interview more victims. He needed to build an ironclad case. And he needed to find Marcus Johnson and apologize on behalf of a department that had failed him. The next morning, Captain Morrison arrived at his office before sunrise. He had barely slept. His mind kept replaying the scene outside the coffee shop, kept thinking about Marcus Johnson and all the other people who had been treated poorly by officers who were supposed to protect them. Morrison made a list of people he needed to interview. Rodriguez had given him 8 names of other victims. He would talk to each one personally. But first, he needed to understand exactly who Derek Mitchell was and why the department had protected him for so long. Morrison pulled Mitchell's complete personnel file. The picture that emerged was troubling. Mitchell had joined the Portland Police Department 8 years ago after working as a security guard. His academy scores were average. His early performance reviews were unremarkable. But about 4 years ago, something changed. Mitchell became more aggressive in his arrests. He racked up impressive statistics for moving homeless people out of certain neighborhoods. His supervisors praised him for cleaning up problem areas. He received commendations for his work. On paper, he looked like a good officer who was tough on crime, but Morrison saw what was hidden beneath the surface. The complaints started around the same time. At first, just 1 or 2 per year. Then they increased. 3 complaints, then 5, then 12 in the last year alone. Each complaint told a similar story. Mitchell was cruel to homeless people, especially Black and Latino individuals. He destroyed their property. He made racist comments. He threatened them. Every complaint had been investigated by Mitchell's direct supervisors. Every single one was dismissed. The reasons were always the same. The complainant was not credible. There was no evidence. It was just a misunderstanding. Mitchell was just doing his job. Morrison felt sick reading through the files. The system had failed over and over again, and now Marcus Johnson was just the latest victim in a long line of people who had been hurt and ignored. Morrison closed the file and picked up his phone. He called the first person on his list, a man named Thomas Williams. Thomas was a 40-year-old Black man who had filed a complaint against Mitchell 6 months ago. Thomas agreed to meet Morrison at a park near downtown. When Morrison arrived, he found Thomas sitting on a bench feeding pigeons. Thomas was thin and looked older than 40. His clothes were worn but clean. "Mr. Williams, thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Morrison said, sitting down next to him. Thomas looked at Morrison suspiciously. "You're the 5th person from the police department I've talked to about Mitchell. Nobody ever does anything. Why should this time be different?" Morrison understood the suspicion. "Because this time I have evidence. This time, other officers are willing to testify. This time, I'm not going to let it get buried." Thomas studied Morrison's face, trying to decide if he could trust him. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you what happened." Thomas explained that 6 months ago he had been sleeping under a bridge. It was raining hard and the bridge provided some shelter. Mitchell found him around midnight. Without any warning, Mitchell kicked Thomas awake and told him to leave. "I was confused and scared," Thomas said. "I asked where I was supposed to go. It was pouring rain." He said he didn't care. He said people like me made the city look bad. Then he took my backpack and dumped everything in the river. My clothes, my blanket, my ID, everything. Just threw it all in the water. Morrison felt his anger rising. "Did you report it?" "I tried," Thomas said. "I went to the police station the next day. The officer who took my complaint looked at me like I was lying. He said Mitchell was a good officer and I probably did something to provoke him. My complaint was rejected. Morrison took detailed notes. Would you be willing to testify about this in an official hearing? Thomas hesitated. Will I be safe? Mitchell told me if I ever complained about him, he would make sure I went to jail for a long time. You'll be safe, Morrison promised. I give you my word. Morrison spent the rest of the day interviewing the other people on his list. Every story was similar. Mitchell targeted vulnerable people. He was cruel and abusive. He specifically went after Black and Latino individuals. And every single complaint had been dismissed or ignored. By the end of the day, Morrison had 8 detailed statements from victims. He had a clear pattern of behavior. But he needed more. He needed to find Marcus Johnson. Sarah Chen was also looking for Marcus. After their conversation at Hope House, Marcus had left. Sarah needed to find him again to get photos and to make sure he was okay. She checked all the shelters and places where homeless people gathered. Finally, she found him at a small park near the river. Marcus was sitting on a bench watching the water flow by. He looked peaceful but also incredibly sad. Sarah approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Mr. Johnson," she said gently, "how are you doing?" Marcus looked up and gave her a small smile. "I'm alive." "That's something, I guess." Sarah sat down next to him. "I've been working on your story. I want to show you what I've written so far. Make sure I got everything right." She pulled out her laptop and opened the document. Marcus read slowly, his lips moving slightly as he went through each sentence. When he finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You made me sound like a hero," he finally said. "You are a hero," Sarah replied. "You served your country. You survived things most people can't imagine. You're still here, still fighting. That's heroic." Marcus shook his head. "I don't feel like a hero. Heroes don't end up homeless. Heroes don't get their belongings thrown in the trash by police officers." Sarah turned to face him directly. "Mr. Johnson, listen to me. What happened to you is not your fault. The system failed you. The country you fought for failed you. But that doesn't make you less of a hero. It makes the system less worthy of you." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him with such respect and kindness. "Thank you," he whispered. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. "I have something for you," she said. Marcus unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a new American flag, folded properly in the triangle shape used for veterans. Sarah had gone to a military supply store and bought it specifically for him. "I know Officer Mitchell threw your flag in the trash," Sarah said. "I know it probably had special meaning to you. This one is new, but I hope it helps." Marcus held the flag carefully like it was made of glass. His hands were shaking. "This means more to me than you know," he said, his voice breaking. At that moment, Captain Morrison walked up to the bench. He had been searching for Marcus all day and had finally tracked him down. When he saw Marcus holding the flag with tears running down his face, Morrison felt a knot in his throat. "Mr. Johnson," Morrison said, "my name is Captain James Morrison. I'm with Internal Affairs. I was there yesterday morning. I saw what Officer Mitchell did to you." Marcus looked up at Morrison with wary eyes. "You're a cop. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Morrison said honestly. "The police department has given you no reason to trust us. But I'm here to tell you that what happened to you was wrong. It was cruel and it was illegal. And I'm going to make sure Officer Mitchell faces consequences for his actions." Marcus stood up slowly. He was taller than Morrison had expected, and despite the rough living, he still had the bearing of a military man. "I've heard promises before, Captain. Promises don't mean much to people like me." "I understand," Morrison said. "But this time is different. I have video evidence of what Mitchell did. I have testimony from his partner, Officer Rodriguez. I have statements from 8 other people he abused. I have everything I need to take him down. But I need your help too." "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked. "I want you to tell me everything that happened yesterday morning. I want you to file an official complaint, and I want you to be willing to testify at Mitchell's disciplinary hearing." Marcus sat back down on the bench. He looked tired, like this conversation was taking all his energy. "If I do this, if I go through with it, will anything actually change? Or will he get a slap on the wrist and then come back and make my life even worse?" Morrison sat down next to Marcus. "I can't promise you that the entire system will change overnight, but I can promise you that Derek Mitchell will not be a police officer anymore when this is over." He's going to lose his badge. And if I can build a strong enough case, he might face criminal charges too. Sarah was listening to this conversation carefully. She could see Marcus struggling with the decision. He had been beaten down by life so many times. Trusting anyone, especially a police officer, was incredibly hard. "Mr. Johnson," Sarah said, "I know it's scary to come forward, but your story matters. What happened to you happens to hundreds of homeless people every day. Nobody sees it. Nobody cares. But if you speak up, if you let me tell your story, maybe things can start to change. Maybe the next veteran who ends up on the streets won't have to go through what you went through." Marcus looked at Sarah, then at Morrison, then down at the flag in his hands. He thought about all the other people like him. People who were invisible, who were treated like trash, who were abused by people in power. "Okay," Marcus finally said. "I'll do it. I'll tell you everything. I'll file a complaint. I'll testify. But not just for me. For everyone else who Mitchell has hurt." Morrison felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I know this wasn't an easy decision." They spent the next hour sitting on that park bench while Marcus gave his official statement. Morrison recorded everything on his phone. Marcus spoke clearly and calmly, describing exactly what Mitchell had said and done. He didn't exaggerate or add drama. He just told the truth. When Marcus finished, Morrison had everything he needed. The video evidence, the statements from other victims, Rodriguez's testimony, and now Marcus's official complaint. The case against Mitchell was solid. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Morrison put his phone away. "Now I go back to the station and I file charges against Officer Mitchell. He'll be suspended immediately pending an investigation. There will be a disciplinary hearing. Probably within 2 weeks. You'll be asked to testify. So will the other victims. And then?" Marcus asked. "And then the board will decide his punishment. I'm going to push for termination and criminal charges. But I need to be honest with you. The system doesn't always work the way it should. Sometimes officers get protected even when the evidence is clear." Marcus nodded. He had expected that answer. At least someone is trying. "That's more than I usually get." Sarah closed her laptop. "My story is going to run tomorrow morning. The video will be published with it. Once it goes live, this is going to get a lot of attention. The media will probably want to interview you." "Are you ready for that?" Marcus thought about it. Part of him wanted to stay invisible, to avoid the spotlight. But another part of him, the part that had once been a soldier, knew that this fight was important. "I'm ready," he said. That night, Sarah finished writing her article. She read through it 3 times, making sure every fact was accurate, every quote was correct. She included the video of the incident. She included background information on Marcus's military service. She included the statistics about complaints against Mitchell. She included statements from Morrison about the investigation. The headline was simple and powerful. "Portland police officer abuses homeless veteran. Internal Affairs launches investigation." Sarah sent the article to her editor at midnight. It would be published first thing in the morning, both in print and online. She knew it would make waves. She knew it would be controversial. But she also knew it was the right thing to do. Morrison stayed up late too, preparing his case. He organized all the evidence, all the statements, all the documentation. He wrote a formal recommendation for Mitchell's immediate suspension. He prepared the paperwork for criminal civil rights charges. Tomorrow would be the start of something big. Morrison could feel it. This wasn't just about one bad officer anymore. This was about a system that needed to change. And Marcus Johnson, a homeless veteran who had been treated like trash, was going to be the catalyst for that change. Marcus spent that night at Hope House Shelter. He lay in his narrow bed, holding the new flag Sarah had given him. He thought about his wife, about his daughter, about all the choices and circumstances that had led him to this moment. Tomorrow, his face would be in the newspaper. Tomorrow, everyone would know his story. Tomorrow, the fight would begin. Marcus was scared, but he was also ready. He had survived Vietnam. He could survive this too. Sarah Chen's article went live at 6 in the morning. Within the first hour, it had been shared 3,000 times on social media. By 9 o'clock, the video of Officer Mitchell abusing Marcus had been viewed over 100,000 times. By noon, it had gone viral. The video was everywhere. On Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. People were outraged. Comments flooded in by the thousands. Veterans groups shared the video with angry captions. Civil rights organizations called for immediate action. Regular citizens expressed their disgust and shame. Officer Derek Mitchell woke up that morning with no idea that his world was about to explode. He made coffee, ate breakfast, and was getting ready for his shift when his phone started buzzing nonstop. Text messages from other officers, calls from his supervisor, notifications from social media. Mitchell opened his phone and saw the video. His face went pale. He watched himself kick Marcus's bag, throw the ID card, dump Marcus's belongings in the trash. He heard his own cruel laughter. He saw everything that had seemed so insignificant at the time now displayed for the entire world to see. Mitchell's phone rang. It was his sergeant. "Mitchell, get to the station right now. The captain wants to see you immediately." When Mitchell arrived at the police station 30 minutes later, reporters were already gathered outside. They shouted questions at him as he rushed through the door. "Officer Mitchell, do you have anything to say about the video? Do you regret your actions? Are you a racist?" Mitchell pushed through without answering and went straight to Captain Morrison's office. Morrison was waiting for him, his face like stone. "Sit down, Mitchell," Morrison said coldly. Mitchell sat down, trying to appear confident even though his hands were shaking. "Captain, that video doesn't show the whole story. That homeless guy was causing problems. I was just doing my job." Morrison slid a folder across the desk. "This folder contains statements from 8 other people you've abused. It contains testimony from Officer Rodriguez about your pattern of targeting minorities and homeless individuals. It contains records showing you've forgotten to turn on your body camera 47 times in 2 years. Would you like me to continue?" Mitchell's confident expression crumbled. "I want my union representative." "You can have your representative," Morrison said. "But first you need to know that as of right now, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation. You will surrender your badge and your weapon. You will have no contact with any witnesses or other officers involved in this case. And if you violate any of these terms, you will be arrested." "You can't do this," Mitchell said, his voice rising. "I have rights. I have friends in this department." Morrison stood up. "Your rights will be respected throughout this process. As for your friends, we'll see how many stick around when the truth comes out. Now give me your badge and weapon." Mitchell stood up angrily. He pulled his badge from his belt and slammed it on the desk. He did the same with his service weapon. "This is wrong. That homeless guy is nobody. He's just trying to get attention." "That homeless guy," Morrison said slowly, "is Marcus Johnson. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He earned a Silver Star for saving 3 men under enemy fire. He earned a Purple Heart for being wounded in combat. He worked honestly for 30 years. He lost everything when his wife died of cancer. And you treated him like garbage. That's what's wrong here, Mitchell. Not the fact that you're being held accountable." Mitchell left the office without another word. As he walked through the station, other officers stared at him. Some looked angry. Some looked disappointed. Some looked away, not wanting to be associated with him. Outside the police station, the crowd of reporters had grown. There were also protesters now. Veterans in uniform holding signs that said, "Respect our heroes," and "Veterans deserve better." Community. Activists holding signs that said, "End police. Brutality and justice for Marcus." The police chief, Chief Margaret Anderson, called an emergency press conference for 2 o'clock that afternoon. The department's conference room was packed with reporters, cameras, and microphones. Chief Anderson stood at the podium looking serious. "Good afternoon," she began. "I want to address the incident involving Officer Derek Mitchell and Marcus Johnson that occurred 2 days ago and came to public attention this morning. First, I want to say that the behavior shown in that video does not represent the values of the Portland Police Department. It was wrong, it was cruel, and it will not be tolerated." A reporter shouted a question. "Chief Anderson, why was Officer Mitchell still on duty when he had 12 previous complaints against him?" Chief Anderson took a breath. "That's a fair question and one that I'm asking myself. The truth is, our system for investigating complaints has failed. Those complaints were not taken seriously enough. That's on us and we're going to fix it." Another reporter asked, "What's going to happen to Officer Mitchell?" "Officer Mitchell has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation," Chief Anderson said. "Captain Morrison of Internal Affairs is leading that investigation. If the evidence supports termination, Mitchell will be fired. If the evidence supports criminal charges, We will work with the district attorney's office to prosecute. What about Marcus Johnson? Another reporter asked. What is the department doing to help him? We are reaching out to Mr. Johnson to offer our assistance, Chief Anderson said. We want to connect him with veteran services, housing assistance, and any other resources he needs. We failed him, and we want to make it right. The press conference lasted an hour. Chief Anderson answered every question, even the hard ones. She admitted failures. She promised changes. She looked like a leader who genuinely wanted to do better. While the press conference was happening, Marcus Johnson was at Hope House Shelter watching it on TV in the common room. Other people from the shelter gathered around to watch with him. Some of them had their own stories about being mistreated by police officers. They watched in amazement as a police chief admitted that the department had failed. Do you think anything will actually change? Asked a woman named Linda who had been homeless for 3 years. Marcus wasn't sure how to answer. Maybe, he said. Or maybe this is just words to calm people down. We'll see what they actually do. After the press conference, Marcus's phone rang. He had gotten a cheap phone from the shelter just yesterday. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered it. Mr. Johnson, this is Walter Freeman from Portland Veterans Services. I saw the news about what happened to you. I want to help. Marcus was suspicious. He had dealt with veteran services before and usually hit dead ends. Help how? I want to get you into permanent housing, Walter said. We have an emergency placement program for homeless veterans. I can get you into an apartment within 48 hours. It's yours as long as you need it while we work on getting you into permanent veteran housing. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why now? I've been trying to get help for years, Walter sighed. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Johnson. It shouldn't take a viral video for us to help veterans. But sometimes it takes public attention to cut through the bureaucracy. I'm sorry it took this long, but please let me help you now. Marcus thought about it. Part of him wanted to refuse out of pride. But he was tired of sleeping outside. He was tired of being cold and hungry and invisible. Okay, he said. What do I need to do? Just meet me at my office tomorrow morning at 9, Walter said. Bring whatever documents you have. We'll take care of the rest. After hanging up, Marcus sat in stunned silence. Could things really change this fast? Could his life actually get better? The next phone call came an hour later. This time it was from a woman named Jennifer. Marcus's heart stopped when he heard her voice. It was his daughter. Dad, Jennifer said, and Marcus could hear that she was crying. Dad, I saw the video. I saw the news. I've been looking for you for months. Why didn't you call me? Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. Jenny, I didn't want to be a burden. You have your own family, your own life. I didn't want to drag you down with me. You're not a burden, Jennifer sobbed. You're my father. I love you. I've been so worried about you. They talked for an hour. Jennifer lived in Seattle now, about 3 hours away. She was married with 2 kids, Marcus's grandchildren who he had never met. She had tried to find him after he disappeared, but he had hidden too well. I'm coming to see you this weekend, Jennifer said. I'm bringing Tom and the kids. They need to meet their grandfather. Marcus couldn't speak. He just cried and nodded even though Jennifer couldn't see him. Meanwhile, the story continued to spread. National news networks picked it up. Major newspapers wrote editorials about how society treats veterans and homeless people. Civil rights organizations called for systemic reforms in police departments across the country. Derek Mitchell's life was falling apart. His wife had seen the video and was horrified. She had never known about his behavior at work. She moved out that same day, taking their 2 children with her. Mitchell's friends in the department were distancing themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with him now. Mitchell hired a lawyer, a man named Richard Burke who specialized in defending police officers. Burke watched the video and shook his head. This is bad, Derek, Burke said. Really bad. The video is clear. Your own partner is testifying against you. You have a pattern of similar behavior. I can defend you, but I'm going to be honest. The best outcome we can hope for is that you lose your job but avoid criminal charges. Mitchell's face turned red. That's not good enough. I need my job back. I need my reputation back. Burke leaned forward. Derek, your reputation is gone. The entire country has seen you abuse a homeless veteran. The best thing you can do now is show remorse, apologize, and try to move on with your life. I'm not apologizing, Mitchell said stubbornly. I didn't do anything wrong. Burke closed his briefcase. Then you're going to lose everything. Your job, your family, possibly your freedom. But if that's how you want to play it, that's your choice. Back at the police station, Captain Morrison was building his case. He had testimony from 9 victims. He had Rodriguez's statement about the pattern of abuse. He had the body camera records showing Mitchell's suspicious forgetfulness. He had the video evidence from Sarah Chen. The case was solid. Morrison scheduled the disciplinary hearing for the following week. Mitchell would have a chance to defend himself in front of a panel of 3 captains and the deputy chief. They would decide if he should be fired and if criminal charges were warranted. Sarah Chen continued to report on the story. She interviewed community members, police reform advocates, and other homeless veterans. She wrote a follow-up article about systemic problems in how police treat homeless people. Her work was nominated for a Regional Journalism Award. 3 days after the video went viral, there was a community meeting at City Hall. Over 500 people showed up. Veterans groups, homeless advocates, civil rights organizations, and regular citizens all came together to demand change. Marcus attended the meeting, wearing clean clothes that the shelter had provided. He sat in the back, trying to stay invisible despite being the center of attention, but people recognized him. Veterans came up to shake his hand and thank him for his service. People told him they were proud of him for speaking out. Then the organizer of the meeting asked Marcus to come to the microphone and speak. Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. He wasn't a public speaker. He was just a homeless guy. But then he thought about all the other people like him, people who were invisible and ignored. He stood up and walked to the front. Marcus stood at the microphone looking out at hundreds of faces staring at him. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he began. 3 days ago I was nobody. I was just another homeless person that people walked past without seeing. Officer Mitchell treated me like I was trash because that's how society sees people like me. We're not people with stories and dignity. We're just problems to be cleaned up. The room was completely silent. Everyone was listening, but I'm not trash, Marcus continued, his voice getting stronger. I served my country. I worked hard my whole life. I loved my wife and raised my daughter. I did everything right. And then life happened. My wife got sick and died. The bills buried me. My PTSD came back, and I ended up on the streets. Marcus paused and looked around the room. There are thousands of veterans like me in this city. Thousands of good people who just hit hard times. We deserve to be treated with dignity. We deserve help, not harassment. We deserve to be seen as human beings. The room erupted in applause. People stood up clapping and cheering. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the support. For the first time in years, he felt like he mattered. After the meeting, Marcus was surrounded by people wanting to help. Veteran organizations offered services. Mental health professionals offered free counseling. A local businessman offered Marcus a job once he got housing. The outpouring of support was incredible. But Marcus knew this attention wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the news cycle would move on. The cameras would disappear. The question was whether the changes would last. Would the police department really reform? Would society treat homeless people better? Or would everything go back to the way it was before? Marcus didn't know the answer. But for now he had hope, and that was something he hadn't felt in a very long time. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. The hearing room at the police station was packed with people. Media representatives filled the back rows. Community activists sat with notebooks and cameras. Veterans in uniform sat together, showing support for Marcus. Derek Mitchell sat at a table with his lawyer, Richard Burke. Mitchell wore a dark suit instead of his uniform. He looked angry and defiant. His arms were crossed and he refused to make eye contact with anyone. At another table sat Captain Morrison with stacks of files and evidence. Next to him was an attorney from the city's legal department. They had spent days preparing for this hearing. Marcus Johnson sat in the front row of the audience section. He wore a borrowed suit that was slightly too big for him. Sarah Chen sat next to him for support. On Marcus's other side sat his daughter Jennifer, who had driven down from Seattle. She held her father's hand tightly. The panel of judges entered through a side door. There were 4 of them, 3 police captains and Deputy Chief Thomas Warren. They sat at a long table at the front of the room. Deputy Chief Warren would lead the hearing. This hearing is now in session, Warren announced. We are here to determine if Officer Derek Mitchell violated department policies and if his employment should be terminated. Officer Mitchell. You have been charged with excessive use of authority, abuse of power, discrimination, and conduct unbecoming an officer. How do you plead? Burke stood up. My client pleads not guilty to all charges. The incident in question has been taken out of context. Officer Mitchell was simply doing his job to maintain public order. Warren nodded. Very well. Captain Morrison, please present your case. Morrison stood and approached a screen that had been set up in the room. I'll begin by showing the video evidence of the incident that started this investigation. He pressed play. The room fell silent as the video played on the large screen. Everyone watched as Mitchell kicked Marcus's belongings, made cruel comments, threw the ID card, and dumped everything in the trash. Even though many people had seen it online, watching it on the big screen with Marcus sitting right there made it more powerful. When the video ended, Morrison spoke. This video clearly shows Officer Mitchell abusing his authority. But this wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of behavior that has been going on for years. Morrison called his first witness. Thomas Williams, the man who had his belongings thrown in the river, took the stand. He was sworn in and told his story. Mitchell stared at him coldly the entire time. Officer Mitchell told me that people like me made the city look bad, Thomas said. Then he threw everything I owned into the river. My clothes, my blanket, my ID, everything. When I tried to complain, nobody believed me. Burke cross-examined Thomas. Mr. Williams, isn't it true that you were trespassing under that bridge? I was trying to stay dry, Thomas answered. There's no law against being under a bridge during a rainstorm. And isn't it true that you have a criminal record? Burke asked. I was arrested for shoplifting 10 years ago, Thomas admitted. But I served my time. That doesn't mean I deserve to have my belongings destroyed. One by one, Morrison called other victims to testify. Maria, whose daughter's homework was torn up. Robert, who had his water poured out during a heat wave. Each person told a similar story. Mitchell had targeted them, humiliated them, destroyed their property. And each time their complaints had been ignored. Then Morrison called Officer Lisa Rodriguez. She walked to the stand with her head held high. She looked nervous but determined. Rodriguez testified about the pattern of behavior she had witnessed. Officer Mitchell specifically targeted homeless people who were Black or Latino. He turned off his body camera before approaching them. He made racist comments regularly. He bragged about cleaning up certain neighborhoods. Burke tried to discredit her. Officer Rodriguez, isn't it true that you're testifying against your partner to save your own career? Rodriguez looked Burke directly in the eye. I'm testifying because what I saw was wrong. I should have reported it sooner. I was a coward and I regret that. But I'm not going to be silent anymore. The hearing broke for lunch after Rodriguez's testimony. Marcus went outside to get some air. He was overwhelmed by everything he was hearing. All these people had suffered just like him. The system had failed all of them. A group of veterans came up to Marcus during the break. One of them, a man in his 70s, shook Marcus's hand. I served in Korea, the man said. I know what you went through in Vietnam. We're here to support you, brother. Marcus felt emotion rising in his throat. Thank you, he managed to say. After lunch, Morrison presented the evidence of Mitchell's body camera malfunctions. He showed logs proving that Mitchell had turned off his camera 47 times in 2 years, almost always before interactions with homeless individuals or people of color. This is not coincidence, Morrison said. This is deliberate. Officer Mitchell knew what he was doing was wrong, so he made sure there was no video evidence. Burke argued that the camera malfunctions were honest mistakes, that the cameras were unreliable. But Morrison pulled out maintenance records showing Mitchell's camera had no technical problems. Then it was time for Marcus to testify. He walked to the stand slowly. His daughter gave him an encouraging smile. Sarah Chen gave him a thumbs up. Marcus was sworn in and sat down. Morrison approached him gently. Mr. Johnson, please tell the panel what happened on the morning of November 1st. Marcus took a deep breath and told his story. He spoke clearly and calmly. He described being kicked awake, having his belongings scattered, showing his veteran ID, and watching everything he owned get thrown in the trash. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't add drama. He just told the truth. How did it make you feel? Morrison asked. Marcus thought about the question. Like I was nothing. Like my service didn't matter. Like I wasn't even human. I fought for this country. I bled for this country. And in that moment I felt like the country I loved had thrown me away, Just like Officer Mitchell threw away my belongings. There wasn't a dry eye in the room except for Mitchell's. He sat with his arms crossed, showing no emotion at all. Burke cross-examined Marcus. Mr. Johnson, isn't it true that you were loitering on that bench in violation of city ordinances? I was sleeping, Marcus said. I had nowhere else to go. And isn't it true that you have a history of mental health problems? Burke asked. Marcus nodded. I have PTSD from my service in Vietnam, but that doesn't make me less deserving of respect. Could your PTSD have affected your perception of what happened that morning? Burke suggested. Marcus looked at Burke steadily. There's nothing wrong with my memory or my perception. What happened is on video for everyone to see. You can question my mental health all you want, but you can't question that video. The audience section burst into applause. Deputy Chief Warren banged his gavel. Order! There will be no outbursts in this hearing. After Marcus stepped down, Morrison rested his case. Burke then called Mitchell to testify in his own defense. Mitchell took the stand and was sworn in. Burke asked him to describe the incident. Mitchell's version was very different from everyone else's. I approached the subject because there had been complaints about homeless individuals in that area. Mitchell said, his voice flat. The subject was sleeping on a public bench. I asked him to move along. He became argumentative. I had to be firm with him to maintain order. Did you kick his belongings? Burke asked. I may have accidentally bumped the bag with my foot, Mitchell said. It wasn't intentional. What about throwing his ID card? Burke continued. I handed it back to him. He dropped it, Mitchell claimed. Morrison watched Mitchell lie and felt disgusted. The video showed exactly what happened, yet Mitchell was trying to rewrite the story. When it was Morrison's turn to cross-examine, he didn't waste time. Officer Mitchell, you say you accidentally bumped Mr. Johnson's bag, but the video clearly shows you kicking it deliberately. Were you lying just now? I told you what I remember, Mitchell said. Morrison pulled out a file. You've had 12 complaints filed against you in 3 years. All from homeless individuals or people of color. Is that a coincidence? Those complaints were investigated and dismissed, Mitchell said. They were false. Or maybe they were true and the system failed to hold you accountable, Morrison shot back. Officer Mitchell, why did you turn off your body camera 47 times in 2 years? The camera malfunctioned, Mitchell said. Maintenance records show your camera had no technical problems, Morrison countered. So were you lying about malfunctions, or were you deliberately turning off your camera to hide your actions? Mitchell's face turned red. I don't have to answer that. Actually, you do, Morrison said. This is a disciplinary hearing. You're required to answer questions truthfully. Burke jumped up. My client is invoking his right against self-incrimination. Warren banged his gavel. Mr. Burke, this is not a criminal trial. Officer Mitchell must answer the question or it will be held against him. Mitchell glared at Morrison. I may have forgotten to turn on the camera sometimes. That's all. 47 times? Morrison pressed. That's not forgetting. That's a pattern. The hearing continued for another 2 hours. Burke called character witnesses who testified that Mitchell was a good officer. But their testimony was weak compared to the mountain of evidence against him. Finally, Deputy Chief Warren called a recess. The panel will deliberate and return with a decision in 1 hour. The panel left the room. Everyone else stayed, too nervous to leave. Marcus sat with his daughter and Sarah, waiting. The hour felt like 10 hours. When the panel returned, everyone stood. Deputy Chief Warren looked serious. He held a piece of paper in his hand. Officer Derek Mitchell, please stand, Warren said. Mitchell stood up slowly. For the first time, he looked nervous. Warren read from the paper. This panel has reviewed all evidence and testimony. We have concluded that you violated multiple department policies including excessive use of authority, abuse of power, discrimination, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Your actions brought shame to this department and violated the trust placed in you as a police officer. Warren looked up from the paper and stared directly at Mitchell. Therefore, this panel unanimously votes to terminate your employment with the Portland Police Department, effective immediately. You are hereby stripped of your badge, your authority, and your position. You are no longer a police officer. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Veterans hugged each other. Community activists celebrated. Marcus felt his daughter squeeze his hand so tight it hurt. Warren banged his gavel for order. Furthermore, this panel recommends that the district attorney's office investigate possible criminal civil rights violations. Officer Mitchell, you have the right to appeal this decision, but the termination stands during any appeal process. Mitchell stood frozen, his face pale. His lawyer whispered something to him, but Mitchell didn't seem to hear. His career was over. The job that had given him power and protection was gone. This hearing is adjourned, Warren announced. As Mitchell left the room, reporters shouted questions at him. He pushed through them without speaking. Outside, protesters who had been waiting booed and held signs. Mitchell got into his car and drove away quickly. Inside, Marcus was surrounded by people congratulating him. Veterans shook his hand. Community members thanked him. Jennifer hugged him and cried. Captain Morrison approached Marcus. Mr. Johnson, I know this doesn't make up for everything you've been through, but I hope it's a start. Marcus shook Morrison's hand. Thank you, Captain. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for fighting for people like me. Morrison nodded. It's my job. I'm sorry it took this long. Sarah Chen was already writing her story on her laptop. The headline would be, Racist Cop Fired After Abusing Homeless Veteran, Criminal Charges Recommended. That night, the news of Mitchell's firing was everywhere. National news covered it. Social media exploded with reactions. Most people celebrated the decision. Some criticized it, saying Mitchell was being made a scapegoat. Marcus watched the news from his new apartment. Yes, a real apartment. Walter Freeman from Veteran Services had kept his promise. Marcus now had a small one-bedroom apartment in a veteran housing complex. It had a bed, a kitchen, a bathroom. It was the most beautiful place Marcus had seen in years. Jennifer had stayed in Portland for a few extra days to help her father settle in. She brought him groceries, helped him pick out some clothes from a thrift store, and made sure he knew where all the veteran services were located. I'm sorry I lost everything, Jenny, Marcus said as they sat in his new apartment. I'm sorry I disappeared from your life. Jennifer hugged her father. Dad, you didn't lose everything. You still have me. You still have your grandkids who can't wait to meet you. You still have your dignity and your courage. Those things never left. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. For so long he had felt like a failure. But looking at his daughter, sitting in his new apartment, knowing that justice had been served, he finally felt like maybe he wasn't a failure after all. Maybe he was exactly what Sarah had called him, a survivor. 3 months had passed since the disciplinary hearing. It was a cold February morning, but Marcus Johnson felt warm as he sat in his apartment drinking coffee. Real coffee from his own kitchen, not donated coffee from a shelter. Simple pleasures meant everything to him now. Marcus looked around his apartment with satisfaction. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. Jennifer had helped him decorate a bit. There were photos on the wall now, pictures of his late wife Sarah, pictures of Jennifer and her family, and a new photo of Marcus with his 2 grandchildren that had been taken during their first meeting. That meeting had been one of the best days of Marcus's life. His grandson Jake was 8 years old and his granddaughter Emma was 6. They had been nervous at first, not sure what to think of this grandfather they had never met. But Marcus showed them his medals from Vietnam, told them age-appropriate stories about his service, and within an hour they were calling him Grandpa and asking when they could visit again. There was a knock on Marcus's door. He opened it to find Walter Freeman from Veteran Services standing there with a big smile. Good morning, Marcus, Walter said. Ready for your first day? Marcus grabbed his jacket. Ready as I'll ever be. Today was Marcus's first day at his new job. A local businessman named Robert Chen, who happened to be Sarah Chen's uncle, had offered Marcus a position at his auto repair shop. Marcus would be working as a mechanic, using the skills he had developed over 30 years of experience. The pay wasn't great, but it was honest work, and it came with health insurance. As Walter drove Marcus to the shop, they talked about how much had changed in 3 months. Marcus had been attending therapy twice a week for his PTSD. He was taking medication that helped with his anxiety and depression. He was eating regular meals and sleeping in a real bed. His health had improved dramatically. "You look like a different person," Walter said. "You've even gained some weight. That's good." Marcus smiled. "I feel like a different person. Or maybe I feel like myself again, like the person I was before everything fell apart." At the auto shop, Robert Chen greeted Marcus warmly. He showed Marcus around, introduced him to the other mechanics, and explained what his duties would be. The other workers were friendly and welcoming. They knew Marcus's story, but they treated him like a regular person, not like a victim or a celebrity. "Take your time learning our systems," Robert said. "No pressure. We're just glad to have someone with your experience." Marcus spent his first day getting familiar with the shop. His hands remembered the work even after 5 years away from it. By the end of the day, he had already helped fix 2 cars. It felt good to be useful again. Meanwhile, across the city, Derek Mitchell was not doing well. After being fired from the police department, his life had continued to fall apart. His wife had filed for divorce. His children barely spoke to him. He had applied to dozens of jobs, but nobody wanted to hire him. His face was too well known, and the video of him abusing Marcus followed him everywhere. The district attorney's office had filed criminal civil rights charges against Mitchell. He was facing up to 5 years in prison if convicted. His lawyer Burke had advised him to take a plea deal, but Mitchell's pride wouldn't let him admit guilt. The criminal trial was scheduled for next month. Mitchell knew he was probably going to lose. The evidence against him was overwhelming, but he still couldn't bring himself to show remorse or apologize. In his mind, he had done nothing wrong. He had just been doing his job. Mitchell spent his days sitting in his small apartment, drinking too much, and feeling sorry for himself. All his friends from the police department had abandoned him. He was alone and broke. He had lost everything, and he blamed Marcus for it. If that homeless man had just moved along quietly, none of this would have happened. Back at the Portland Police Department, things were changing. Captain Morrison had been promoted to deputy chief after his work on the Mitchell case. He was now in charge of implementing reforms across the entire department. The first change was the body camera policy. Cameras could no longer be manually turned off during shifts. They recorded continuously, and the footage was automatically uploaded to a secure server. Officers who tampered with cameras would face immediate termination. The second change was the complaint system. Complaints from civilians were now investigated by an independent civilian oversight board, not by other police officers. This removed the bias that had protected officers like Mitchell for so long. The third change was training. All officers were required to attend new training on bias, de-escalation, and treating vulnerable populations with dignity. The training was taught by community members, including homeless individuals and veterans. Officer Lisa Rodriguez had become an important part of these reforms. She had been promoted to sergeant and was now training new officers. She spoke openly about her experience with Mitchell, about how the culture of silence had nearly made her complicit in abuse. She taught young officers that loyalty to bad cops wasn't real loyalty. It was just cowardice. "Real courage is speaking up when you see something wrong," Rodriguez told a class of new recruits. "Real loyalty is to the community we serve, not to officers who abuse their power." The reforms weren't perfect, and they didn't happen overnight. There was resistance from some officers who thought the changes went too far. But slowly, the culture was shifting. Officers who had been afraid to report misconduct started to feel safe speaking up. Sarah Chen continued to report on these changes. Her work on the Marcus Johnson story had won her a regional journalism award. But more importantly, it had sparked a national conversation about how police treat homeless people and veterans. Sarah had written a series of follow-up articles about systemic issues in policing and homelessness. She interviewed dozens of homeless veterans and documented their struggles. She exposed gaps in the VA system that left veterans without support. She investigated other police departments and found patterns similar to what had happened in Portland. Her work led to policy changes beyond just Portland. Several cities reformed their police departments. Congress held hearings about homeless veterans. The VA committed to improving its services. Change was happening, slowly but surely. One afternoon in late February, Sarah met Marcus for coffee at Joe's coffee shop. It was the same coffee shop where the incident had occurred. Joe Park, the owner, had hired Marcus to help with maintenance work a few hours a week in addition to his mechanic job. Joe wanted to support Marcus and show that his business cared about vulnerable people. "How does it feel to be back here?" Sarah asked as they sat at a table by the window. Marcus looked around the shop. "Strange at first, but Joe has been so kind, and I realized that what happened here wasn't about this place. It was about Mitchell's choices. This is a good place with good people." They talked about everything that had changed. Sarah told Marcus that her articles had been picked up by a major national newspaper, and she had been offered a job with them. Marcus congratulated her warmly. "You started all of this," Marcus said. "If you hadn't recorded that video, Mitchell would still be out there hurting people." Sarah shook her head. "You started it by having the courage to speak up. I just helped amplify your voice." "We both did our part," Marcus said with a smile. Later that day, Marcus attended a speaking engagement at a local high school. He had been invited to talk about his experiences as a veteran and about homelessness. At first, Marcus had been nervous about public speaking, but he had done several events now and was getting more comfortable. The students listened attentively as Marcus told his story. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He talked about the horrors of war, about losing his wife, about the darkness of depression and PTSD, about ending up on the streets, but he also talked about hope, about recovery, about the kindness of strangers, and about never giving up. After his talk, several students came up to ask questions. One teenage boy raised his hand shyly. "Mr. Johnson, do you still have nightmares about Vietnam?" Marcus nodded honestly. "Yes, I do. Probably always will. But therapy has helped me manage them better. PTSD doesn't just go away, but you can learn to live with it." A girl asked, "Are you angry at Officer Mitchell?" Marcus thought about the question carefully. "I was angry at first. Very angry. What he did was cruel and wrong. But staying angry doesn't help me heal. I hope Officer Mitchell learns from this. I hope he becomes a better person. But mostly, I just hope this never happens to anyone else." That night, Marcus had dinner with Jennifer and her family at their house in Seattle. He had started making the drive up there every other weekend. Jake and Emma ran to greet him when he arrived, both talking excitedly about school and their activities. Over dinner, Jennifer's husband Tom asked Marcus how he was really doing. "I'm good," Marcus said. "Better than I've been in years. I have a home, a job, my family. I'm getting the help I need for my PTSD. Things aren't perfect, but they're good." "We're proud of you, Dad," Jennifer said, her eyes wet with tears. "Not just for speaking up about what happened, but for surviving everything you've been through." Marcus hugged his daughter. "I'm proud of you too, Jenny. You turned out amazing. Your mom would be so proud." After dinner, Marcus sat on the floor with his grandchildren and helped them build a tower out of blocks. It was such a simple thing, playing with kids, but it meant everything to him. For years, he had felt like his life was over. But now he realized it wasn't over. It was just a new chapter. In March, Derek Mitchell's criminal trial began. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented the video evidence, testimony from multiple victims, and Officer Rodriguez's statement about the pattern of abuse. The defense tried to argue that Mitchell was just being tough on crime, but the jury wasn't convinced. Marcus attended the trial, but he didn't testify. The video evidence was strong enough without him. He sat in the courtroom and watched Mitchell, trying to understand what made someone treat other people so cruelly. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Mitchell showed no emotion as the verdict was read. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison and permanently barred from working in law enforcement. As Mitchell was led away in handcuffs, he looked at Marcus one time. There was no apology in his eyes, no remorse, just resentment. Marcus looked back at him with sadness but not anger. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Marcus asking for his reaction. He kept it simple: justice has been served. I hope Officer Mitchell uses his time in prison to think about his actions and become a better person. But more importantly, I hope this case sends a message to police officers everywhere that abusing vulnerable people will not be tolerated. That night, there was a celebration at Hope House Shelter where Marcus had stayed during his darkest days. The staff and residents threw a party to celebrate not just Mitchell's conviction, but also Marcus's recovery and all the positive changes that had happened. Marcus gave a short speech. I want to thank everyone here at Hope House for giving me a safe place when I had nowhere else to go. But I also want to remind everyone that my story shouldn't be special. Every person experiencing homelessness deserves dignity, respect, and help. We need to change the system so that people don't have to go viral to get support. The room applauded. Marcus was right. His story had a happy ending, but thousands of other homeless people were still struggling, still invisible, still treated poorly. But change was happening. The Marcus Johnson Initiative, a non-profit started in his name, was helping homeless veterans get housing and services. The organization had already helped over 100 veterans in just 3 months. Police departments across the country were examining their practices. Some were implementing reforms similar to Portland's. The conversation about how society treats homeless people and veterans was finally happening on a national level. In April, Marcus attended a ceremony at City Hall. The mayor presented him with the key to the city and officially declared it Marcus Johnson Day in Portland. Veterans groups, community organizations, and regular citizens attended the ceremony. Captain Morrison, now Deputy Chief Morrison, spoke at the ceremony. Marcus Johnson represents the best of what it means to be American. He served his country with honor. He faced unimaginable hardship with dignity, and he had the courage to speak truth to power. Our city is better because of him. Marcus was embarrassed by all the attention, but also grateful. He gave a brief speech. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who wanted to be treated like a human being. But if my story can help change things for other people, then maybe something good came out of something bad. Thank you all for supporting me. But don't forget about the people who are still struggling. They need your support too. After the ceremony, Marcus went back to his apartment. He sat on his couch and looked at the key to the city sitting on his coffee table. It was surreal. 6 months ago, he was sleeping on a bench. Now he had an apartment, a job, his family back in his life, and the key to the city. Marcus picked up the phone and called Jennifer. Hey, Jenny. Just wanted to call and tell you I love you. I love you too, Dad, Jennifer said. Are you okay? Yeah, Marcus said with a smile. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually okay. That night, Marcus sat by his window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, other people were sleeping on benches and under bridges. Other veterans were struggling with PTSD and homelessness. Other vulnerable people were being treated poorly by those in power. Marcus couldn't help everyone, but he had helped start a conversation. He had helped create change. And maybe, just maybe, the next veteran who ended up on the streets wouldn't have to go through what Marcus had gone through. Marcus Johnson had survived Vietnam. He had survived losing his wife. He had survived homelessness. He had survived abuse and humiliation. And now he was thriving. He was proof that it's never too late for things to get better. It's never too late for justice. It's never too late for redemption. As Marcus got ready for bed, he looked at the American flag that Sarah Chen had given him. It sat folded in its triangle on his dresser. He touched it gently, thinking about everything it represented. The country he had fought for. The country that had failed him. The country that had finally, after everything, made things right. Tomorrow, Marcus would wake up and go to work. He would fix cars and make an honest living. He would attend his therapy appointment and work on his PTSD. He would call his daughter and talk to his grandchildren. He would live a normal, quiet life, and that was exactly what he wanted. Not fame, not attention, just a normal life with dignity and respect. After everything he had been through, that simple life was the greatest gift of all. Marcus turned off the light and climbed into his bed. His own bed, in his own apartment, in his own home. He closed his eyes, and for once his dreams were peaceful.